It is Locked On Jazz for the 14th of February. Happy Valentine's Day. Oh no, you forgot to tell someone Happy Valentine's Day. You still have time. You'll be okay. The Jazz rotation begins to take form as they win their fifth straight. Donovan Mitchell's energy, tenacious defense, and all-around good guyness is worth talking about. Justin Zanik speaks to the media to redo the trade deadline, and there's one story about the trade deadline that is simply not being talked about enough. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Pow.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen every single day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the little bell. It'll notify you whenever we go. You can also just follow on any of our podcast providers. Today's show is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online, as you covered this season with more props, odds, lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. So the Jazz won their fifth in a row with a solid win over Orlando on Friday. We'll dig into it. The rotation's beginning to make some sense. There was a different element to the Jazz, and still one thing that must be talked about the trade deadline. But quick little reminder, some interesting kind of notes here. Hassan Whiteside has been coming off the bench. When he's in his regular spot coming off the bench, we're 28-9 this year. When Donovan plays, we're 30-14. And when Rudy Gobert plays, we're 29-13. Just kind of remember these things as people lost their minds in January when our players didn't play. Few things about the Orlando game that I thought they're really interesting. The first was the defense. And I think a lot of this is being led by Donovan, who is just making a larger, stronger, more concerted effort to be active and engage defensively. But 15 steals by the Jazz. If there's been a signature to who the Jazz are, it's actually why they kind of have struggled against the Rockets at times and lost a game against the Rockets this year, is who we play tonight, is we don't force turnovers. Understandably, we're 29th in the league in forcing turnovers. The reason is because we have Rudy usually, and so we go and play that shell defense. We force you to take shots in the worst possible shots places you can. If you look at shot distribution in the NBA from a defensive standpoint, we have, I believe, we're down to fourth in the league in we were number one before Rudy got hurt. We're now fourth in the league in where we make teams shoot from. We allow the fourth fewest shots in the league at the rim and the ninth fewest shots in the league from three. Only Washington is in the top 10 in both as well. We used to be in the top 5. The thing that the impact of that is what actually happens to us is to do that. We don't usually force a lot of turnovers. In fact, we're 29th in the league in forcing turnovers. And it makes sense. Like our defense has always been very good. We're top 10 again this year, despite the fact we're 29th. And it's unusual, frankly. The other top 10 defensive teams in the league are almost all high turnover forcing teams. The number 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, and 10. So 6 of the top 10 defensive teams are also in the top 10 in forcing turnovers. Long, athletic, get into you, force you to make mistakes. You know, that Cleveland, Phoenix, Boston, Golden State are the best. Miami, those type of teams. We don't have that personnel, so we play it in a different fashion. The downside is that at times when we face a team that turns it over a lot, like Houston. So Houston tonight is interesting. They're the 14th best shooting team in the league. They're 30th in the league in turnovers by a huge margin. So then they're 27th in the league offensively. But when we play them, we didn't force them into a lot of turnovers. So then we end up in a bit of trouble. The fact is that when we've suddenly started forcing turnovers the other night against Orlando in a way that we just haven't before. Just we are more tenacious, getting in on them. 4 steals by Royce, 3 steals by Donovan, 3 steals by Trent. Trent's part of this. Trent's played 24 minutes last night or the other night, Friday night, and had 3 steals in those 24 minutes. He brings a tenacity and a level of defense we haven't had before. Pascal played 12 minutes and got a steal. And that's, those are interesting things. Now it's going to be, there's 2 different things, playing regular season minutes and playoff minutes. And for both Pascal and Forrest, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays. One thing that became clear the other night was as we watched the rotation, there's 25 Joe Ingles minutes that now need to be distributed. And there's 20 Rudy Gay minutes until Rudy Gay gets healthy. He's out again with the right knee soreness. Hopefully it's not particularly long lasting, and it's been fairly long lasting. Hopefully it's nothing too serious here on a 35-year-old knee. But Pascal got 12 of those. The center minutes, Azubuike played 21 and Whiteside played 27. Whiteside had 15 points and 18 rebounds. And the Jazz kind of putting him back into that bench moment seems to be the right answer for him. When Rudy comes back, which is hopefully tonight, you'll see him roll back into the backup spot. And then Azubuike, who's had a nice run and shown himself a little, probably drops out of the rotation. Some of the things were interesting in, where are Rudy Gay's minutes going? Pascal played 12. Royce was up at 35. Donovan was up at 35. Bojan was up at 32. So all of those kind of took a little bit there. We'll see whether whether Pascal gets that stretched out anymore or not. And then Trent Forrest played 24 minutes, which were really Joe Ingles 25 minutes. And that's interesting. And it really changes who we are as a team. One, you don't have the 40% shooting of Joe Ingles on the negative side of things, but you wanted a lot of people wanted their wing defender. That's probably your wing defender. It also lets to some really small lineups. So it'll be interesting to see how we deal with this. I think we had one lineup that had, Jordan basically playing the 3. When Donovan and Trent Forrest have been on the floor together this year, it's only been 124 possessions. We're through the roof. We're nearly plus 40. Our offense is in the 100th percentile and our defense is in the 100th percentile. It's only been for 124 possessions. It's too new to know what it really is. And almost none of it's with Rudy, interestingly enough. But what is interesting about that is if you recall, when we looked at Donovan Mitchell on the floor without Joe Ingles and without Mike Conley this year, when the injury happened, the Jazz were struggling at that. And now they're up to plus 6. Mike Conley will play with Trent a little bit more because that bench unit that used to have Joe in it is where Trent is playing. And so that lineup comes in a little bit more. And so if you look at Mike Conley with Trent Forrest this year without Joe Ingles on the floor, we're plus 28.4. Again, just 134 possessions, but again, 100th percentile offensively and 100th percentile defensively. So this is worth keeping an eye on. Is there something to Forrest kind of being that tenacious on-ball defender that is next to our guards, that we're still having Donovan and Mike, where it's a secondary ball handler, and his lack of shooting has not become negative as of this point. So that's kind of an interesting little one to keep an eye on. Those lineups are working brilliantly in very, very small sample size, 128, 130 possessions. It's too little to take an eye on, but it's 120 to 130 of awesome possessions. Let's put it that way here in the opening level. The story that is not being discussed enough about what the Utah Jazz did at the trade deadline. Justin Zanik did talk to us, and let's talk Donovan as we continue on Locked On Jazz today. Thanks again for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of today. Today's show brought to you by Built Bar. the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. Have you tried the marshmallow infused puffs yet? It's crazy. They're so good. I uh they are that's exactly what they are. Protein infused marshmallow. Fluffy marshmallow. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. They're covered with 100% real chocolate. I love the emails I kind of get every now and then like, "Okay, I finally broke down. You've just harassed me enough." It was almost like I bullied them into like ordering Built bars. And then they're like, "You know what? This is super great. I like really, really like this. I got to admit it." Um, I got an email the other day. I finally tried Built Bar Puffs. Holy beep! They're the best texture and their taste amazing. I got lemon cheesecake, but now I have to see a banana cream pie. And this is my favorite pie, so I'll be getting those too. So that is the story at built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and you get 15% off. They have strawberry bars are out today, which is with real strawberry pieces with 100% chocolate on the outside. You can now get a Puffs mixed box with coconut, marshmallow, banana cream pie, and churro. I love the ruby chocolate as well. All there for you. And of course, the coconut brownie chunk is the greatest bar on the planet. It's all brought to you by Built Bar, and it's at built.com, promo code LOCK15. The Super Bowl world is behind us, so it is time for, if you want to get into the action, you can continue to play and to partake in all of the other sports at betonline.net. Football might be over, but basketball's full steam, pro and college. Latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired coach is going to land. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, news this season. And it's not just basketball. It's also hockey, boxing, UFC, odds, right to the Olympic coverage at betonline.net. Head to the website today. Get your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts. Donovan Mitchell's defense the last few nights has been a open commitment and frankly acknowledgement that it wasn't where it was needed to be before. And his energy has been relentless. Let's see how long he can keep it. It's hard to do. But his energy has been, frankly, team changing at this point. One of my favorite moments the other day was Hassan Whiteside asked out because he was exhausted. Great. Ron and I used to talk about on the air that we didn't feel like our guys actually, we really needed the guys to do frankly, to be exhausted after games. We weren't convinced that our guys were exhausted after games, which was a nice way of saying like we weren't sure they were playing hard enough. And Donovan has just been the opposite of that recently. He has just been all over the place, tenacious. And whether is it the young guys exposed it or what's going on with it, I don't know. But whatever it is, it's just great to see. And he's just is rebounding, pushing on the break, defending, picking up at higher pickup points. Just been terrific. And then you couple that with the way Trent Forrest has been playing. It's really great. The other one about Donovan, I don't know if you saw this weekend, but he spent like Saturday bouncing around to local gyms and watching 13 and 14-year-old kids play basketball and taking pictures with them. Seriously? Like, can you be better? Can you be a better dude? And like, maybe this is all part of having fun again. That he's, trying to find, like, what's the joy? This is what he used to do, right? He used to go to the 4th of July holiday parties and enjoy being Donovan Mitchell. And it was as though he lost a little bit of that zest and enjoyment of the game. And he's, for him to go out and just hang out with 13 and 14-year-old kids, he, and take his pictures with them and be welcoming. And there was a tweet out there that he spent like 45 minutes taking pictures with kids after the game. Just great. Just what a cool kid. And I'll tell you what, like my interactions with him all seem to be pretty genuine and pretty real. I think he's trying to figure out in life, like what it means to be Donovan Mitchell, what it means to have a shoe contract, what it means to be an all-star. Well, these guys are all-stars and they do this, so I should do that, and trying to figure out where he fits in that. It's very hard. He's 25, 26 years old, and the world is coming at him like crazy Ferris Bueller fast, and he's trying to figure it out. And every now and then, I think we see him get back to the purity of who he is at 25 years old. But frankly, at 25 years old, I wasn't, I don't think any of us were prepared to have a level of kind of scrutiny and expectation. And, with the contract comes pressure that he has, and we're seeing him kind of learn how to deal with it and work through it. It's pretty fascinating. And it's pretty cool to see him do that. We're 30 and 14 when he plays again. Just remind you on that. That was super cool. Justin Zanik talked this week on Friday, and I thought there were a few things he said that were really interesting, and I totally agree with. One was he was confident about the amount of information that they had about what was going on in the market. And that was my point Friday, is I thought they read the market right. Like Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Grant didn't move. Teams wanted 2 first-round picks for that. Seemed excessive. The word that I got on whether or not they could have just completely salary dumped is that Oklahoma City wanted mammoth amounts, like maybe more than just another first-round pick unprotected. And we'll get back to that in a second. And that, frankly, we saw Derek White and Josh Richardson move for each other, and it involves some first-round picks as well. And I'm not sure that with our lack of picks, the amount of picks we've moved out, our inability to play free agency, and the fact that we really, our game is going to be picks over time, that it was, moving a pick was a pretty dangerous move for us, or how we're going to use it. And I'm not sure that those players at that moment. I like Derek White a lot. I don't know that he moves the meter enough for us to use a pick on him, right? I like Derek White a little bit if we were taking his 4-year contract in exchange for someone's 2-year contract. But I'm not sure I like Derek White for 4 years as our second or third or fourth guard for a first-round pick. Josh Richardson. Like, again, I said this a lot during the week coming into the trade deadline. Like, are you going to find me somebody that finishes? Like Derek White, I don't think is finishing for us. Are you finding someone who's going to finish for us? And if you don't find someone who's going to finish for us, then as Justin said, we just couldn't find the return that was worth the cost. And I think that's pretty accurate to where the deadline market was when you look at the moves. And we couldn't do the Norman Powell, who just broke his foot, by the way, was probably the really interesting, exciting move that would have moved our meter a little bit and probably would have finished. But we also didn't have that expiring contracts, considering the fact that Bledsoe's not guaranteed the next year. We then moved to Portland on another deal to get that money done. And Justin's other point is when we are healthy and connected, we are as good a team as there is in the league with a chance to win a championship. That's true. We have not been as connected this year as the team would like to be or should have been at times. And that's led us to not be as good and be a little bit more inconsistent. And then injuries killed us. The item that I think is not being talked about enough is the fact that Ryan and Ashley Smith didn't just save $30 million. It's actually what I thought they should do. And the word that I'm getting from everyone is that Oklahoma City was asking for an outrageous price, which nobody in the league was willing to pay. As it turned out, they never actually used it. They can use it again at the end of the deadline, at the draft, but they never used their open roster money. To me, this is the biggest story of the deadline if you're a Jazz fan. Ryan and Ashley Smith had a chance at a cost that evidently would have been fairly exorbitant and pretty high on the competitiveness of the Utah Jazz to save $30 million, get the Jazz out of the tax, and get the Jazz out of a potential repeater tax for the future, and they didn't do it. Instead, it's not only $30 million that they would have saved, they also then wouldn't have paid so it's $30 million plus the fact that they're willing to pay the tax this year. I think that's the most untalked about part of this story. It's geeky. It's below the level. Like, what headline is Andy Larson, Eric Walden, Sarah Todd, Tony Jones supposed to write about it? I don't know. And so when it's not talked about, I'm always laugh because I'm actually probably the one who's supposed to talk about it. So I'm talking about it. So now it's being talked about. So what am I to say? It's not. So let's just call it the most important story as a Jazz fan of the trade deadline is that our ownership group, in one of its first real tests, had an opportunity at a very costly opportunity and a high price to save $30 million, get out of the tax, and opted instead not to do that, not to sacrifice future competitiveness, not to say, you know what, fine, we'll just deal with it then. And instead tried to acquire an asset, did save some money on the Joe Ingles deal, which is only logical when he couldn't play anymore. To me, that's really the story of this trade deadline, if you're a Jazz fan. The market didn't materialize. You didn't get Jeremy Grant. You didn't get Harrison Barnes. I don't know that we know that Harrison Barnes and Jeremy Grant changed us that much. We'll find out maybe one day. But I'm pretty certain that Derek White, Josh Richardson didn't change us that much. Justin Holiday, I don't think changed us that much. The one thing that would have changed us was saving $30 million, and they didn't do it. And I think that's pretty impressive. A little bit more on Nikeil Alexander-Walker and why maybe there's a chance that he gets going and how he fits kind of in regards to Daniel House and whether Juancho Hernan-Gomez plays. And then a Trends Monday. I'm going to bring it back. I feel like the league is a little bit settled enough. The Trends Monday is worthwhile. Thanks very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of every single day. Locked On Now is a wonderful program we've built for you on the podcast. It is a nightly recap of every NBA game with the analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. On YouTube, it's on Locked On NBA YouTube channel as well, so subscribe to that. The Nikeil Alexander-Walker is kind of an interesting piece to this puzzle in that how does he materialize? What does he do? And one of the, he's the second most inefficient player in the NBA right now. Like, his decision-making is suspect. Like, there's all sorts of reasons you can just boom, 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 and say no. And there's a reason why New Orleans said no and Portland said no. So let's not kid ourselves about that. Here's what's interesting about him. One thing is he's had 3 coaches in 3 years, all of which had different ways to use him. The second thing that's interesting about Nikeil Alexander-Walker is that when he came out of Virginia Tech, he was really thought to be a 6'5" complementary combo guard who had decent athleticism, great length, and could play with the ball with either hand, but was not a point guard in any way, shape, or form. If you look at him at Vatech, he has his rookie year is 1.5 steals a game. His second year he has 4. You go read Draft Express or any of those things about him, and that's what everyone said about him. Then Nikeil Alexander-Walker goes to Summer League and is amazing. He goes nuts. He averages 28 points, 6 rebounds, or 6 assists, 4 rebounds, hits 3 steals, he is the star of 2019 Summer League. He was brilliant. Dominated the entire Summer League. And he comes out of it, Summer League, the next year, and Alvin Gentry now as the head coach kind of changes what his role is at that point. Because of the stuff he did in Summer League, they get all excited and alter who he is as a player. Then the next year, Stan Van Gundy takes over. So if you look at Alexander-Walker in his first year, he plays kind of everything. He plays every position imaginable. He plays 591 minutes. And if you kind of go back early in his 1920 season, when he's coming off that Summer League, there's all this excitement. He's playing an awful lot early in the year. He opens the year and he plays the first, 14 games of the year, and he ends up not shooting it very well. He's kind of bombing 33%. He bombs, frankly, the way Donovan did. If you look back at it, we didn't have a choice. And then he's out of the rotation. So now the year's kind of a mess. And the next time he actually gets into any stretches of games is about the 37th game of the year. And he plays for 4 more games in a row. And the same thing. He's not great. He's a little better. And he never really gets back into the rotation. Then Alvin Gentry's let go. Then in 2021, he gets another brand new coach, and it's Stan Van Gundy, which is an interesting experience, and Lonzo Ball and all those guys are involved. And they start the year, but they now have changed the way they're using him. And he starts the year and he plays again the first kind of 17 games of the year. He's a little better at this point, doesn't shoot the 3 well. He does shoot 40%. He averages 10 points a game. And then he's just in and out of the rotation. Then injuries strike them, and he gets another kind of window of opportunity where he plays. Let me see if I can find this for you. He plays in the middle of the season for about a little while. And the same, it's not like he suddenly has some great stretch, but he plays 12 games, starts 6 of them, shoots 44% from the floor, 42% from three, and averages 16 points a game. Like that's like the stretch of his career right there where you're like, wait a sec, this is game 75 to 86 in his career. It's a 12-game stretch. Like it suddenly clicked in. And then all of a sudden he's kind of out of the rotation again. Then he plays at the very end of the season. He drops 30 against the Warriors in the second last game of the year. And Stan Van Gundy's fired. And then he gets a new head coach this year. And they start using him in a totally different fashion where they come out of the league with the trade of the acquisition of Devontae Graham and the trade of Lonzo Ball and all that. And they basically are like, you're going to be our scorer. You're going to be our guy. And like we had him in preseason and it was like he was supposed to be the man, which was probably a little more than fair to expect. And he, didn't do it very well. And they kind of had him playing all over the map. So it'll be interesting to see. And they end up playing him about 12% of the time back at point guard. So now all of a sudden, because they've traded Lonzo and Devontae Graham's not really a point guard, they suddenly put the ball in his hands. So he's like evolved from playing basically small forward as a first year, shooting guard as a second year, and then they increased his point guard minutes. It's all over the map. And so it'll be interesting to see whether or not he can evolve as a complement back to where he was supposed to be out of Vatek before he goes nuts in Summer League. And that is playing out of the corners in our system, secondary option. Mike and Donovan do something off a pick and roll, kick to him. He attacks off the 45, gets in the lane, has to make one. If you play from the wings, you make one read. If you play from the top, you make two. It's much more difficult. So you take the lesser players that don't know as much and you read it off the wings. So I think that's the answer. So can he do those things? Can he come off a kick to the corner, pin down with an easy dribble into the middle, open side pick and roll? Simpler, easier things for him by playing off the ball. When I think is next year. I think Daniel House plays before he does. He's been with the team. He understands the system. He defends. He's got a little bit more of a track record. And I think that's I think we see that from him along the way. I think we see House maybe before we see Alexander-Walker. So as much as I just kind of outlined the different world of Alexander-Walker and how his career is kind of how a career gets dislodged and gets misused, 3 different coaches in 3 years, I actually don't think it's going to be until maybe next year that we ever see those moments on him. All right, Trends Monday, which is we kind of just take a quick look at where the rest of the league is. And I think, we've got probably 2 weeks of data now that's outside of COVID. So the hottest team in the league right now, what? Is the Utah Jazz? Wait, we have the best point differential of any team over the last 2 weeks at plus 19.4. Oh, that's interesting. We have the 4th best offense and the 2nd best defense. Oh, Boston has the best defense in the NBA by a mile. They have the 2nd best differential. Phoenix has the 3rd best. Memphis, the 4th. Miami, the 5th. And Milwaukee, the 6th, with Toronto as the 7th. Teams that are collapsing are Detroit, Brooklyn, Washington, Houston, Orlando, Portland, Indiana, and then the Clippers, who lost Norman Powell. By the way, one note on Brooklyn. There's not that much time. I'm big on Brooklyn. There's not that much time left. They're 3 games behind Boston to get out of the play-in. They're 2.5 games behind Toronto. At what point do we see Kevin Durant? At what point do we see Ben Simmons, the half man, half vaccinated, not vaccinated? Kyrie Irving is an issue there. And like, whose fault? Boston's won 9 of 10. Philadelphia's really good. Milwaukee's really good. Cleveland, Chicago. Who's falling apart in the final set of games here that Brooklyn gets out of the play-in game? Right? They played 56 games. We can all do the math from 82. Maybe I can't really fast. I'm pretending like I can. I think that's 26 games. Like if they go 20-6 and Boston goes 17-9, which is not outlandish for Boston at this point, they don't make the play-in. But there's no chance that Brooklyn's going 20-6. I think Brooklyn's going to be in the play-in. And I'm like big on what Ben Simmons does to them. But that's kind of crazy. Last 2 weeks, top 10 offensive team in the league is Milwaukee, followed by Minnesota, Phoenix, Utah, Memphis, Chicago, and Toronto. Top defensive teams are Boston, Utah, without Gobert, Miami, Oklahoma City, Cleveland, Dallas, and Memphis. Teams that are not defending, Brooklyn, Houston, Indiana, Washington, Detroit, Clippers, Chicago, and Denver. A little surprising to see Denver there. And teams that are not scoring, Portland, Oklahoma City, Detroit, Orlando, Washington, Charlotte, and Cleveland. Little interesting. All right, that is Locked On Jazz today. Hope you're having a great one. Thank you very much for tuning in. We super appreciate it. And Nets and Lakers are both likely in the playing game. Lakers, I can't imagine are not, but I think this is not surprising to me. Portland, by the way, is a half game ahead of the Pelicans, a game ahead of the Spurs, and a game and a half ahead of the Kings for the 10th spot in the play-in game. Lakers are 5.5 games away out of 6th. It's not happening. They're 26 and 31. The Jazz are 5.5 games out of being in the play-in game, which is really all that matters to us as well. I'll take Dallas. If we can hold 4, I'll take Dallas or Denver in the first round. And then go get Phoenix in the second round, get the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals, go to the NBA Finals. Sure. Sounds like a good plan. Have a great day. Thanks for